Hello gaming enthusiasts! Welcome to the first episode in the first season of the Ready Player Rewind podcast. I'm Dogeman and I am one of the 4 hosts. Since this is the very first episode of the new podcast, before we jump into the episode, we would like to take a few minutes to introduce the podcast and our plans for the first season. Video games have extended far beyond their initial function as mere entertainment. Video game culture is a diverse community where gaming enthusiasts are connected globally via shared experiences, traditions, and expressions. Esports emerged from gaming culture and has drawn millions of viewers and participants, while opening careers for talented individuals. Video games also influence the advancement of technologies with the demand for more immersive and realistic gaming experiences. This leads to video games constantly being at the forefront of driving innovations in hardware, software, and other technologies such as virtual reality. Most importantly, video games are often connected to ethical issues and current events. The narratives and themes portrayed in video games can reflect societal values. Video games spark discussions on topics like representation, diversity, and the impact of microtransactions. Video games have become a unique platform where contemporary issues are explored, challenging players to investigate a bigger picture and critically examine ethical dimensions in our world. It is safe to say that video games play an important role in our society. As new media students tasked with creating a series of podcasts, we decided to dedicate ours to taking listeners through a journey of the history of different video games that paved the way for the games we know and love today. From legendary classic games to spectacular modern projects, we are excited to have you on this journey with us. In the first season of Ready Player Rewind, we would be focusing on the history of first-person shooter games, commonly known as FPS. FPS has played a pivotal role in shaping the esports scene with its competitive nature. It has drawn massive audiences and created professional esports leagues. The strategic teamwork, precise aiming, and quick reflexes required in first-person shooters make them thrilling to watch and play. As one of the most popular genres in the world of gaming, FPS games continue to push the boundaries of competitive gaming, captivating audiences with intense battles and strategic gameplay. We would discuss the history of well-known FPS titles like Counter-Strike, Valorant, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, and more, each of which has influenced the FPS genre greatly over the years. In each episode, we will also try to invite a special guest, for example, a professional player, streamer, or a game developer familiar with the corresponding game to share their experiences, as well as discussing issues that the game might have created. We hope that this podcast will not only refresh your knowledge of gaming history and culture, but also spark conversations of different ethical issues or benefits these games might have brought to us. Now, let's jump into Season 1, Episode 1 of Ready Player Rewind, the history of PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. Released in 2017, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, commonly known as PUBG, has emerged as a force in the gaming world. As one of the pioneers of the Battle Royale genre, PUBG introduced a unique formula into the world of gaming with the incorporation of a blend between intense survival and strategic gameplay, heightened by the unpredictable elements in the game. The vast, realistic map challenges players to navigate an environment where randomness plays a crucial role in encounters, loot distribution, and the dynamic evolution of each match. The aspect of unpredictability adds excitement to every single game of PUBG, attracting millions of players into the game. PUBG's success paved the way for a surge in Battle Royale games, transforming the gaming landscape and player expectations. Apart from gameplay, PUBG also popularized the Battle Royale format in esports, influencing the competitive gaming scene. Overall, PUBG's influence on gaming can be seen in the continued evolution of Battle Royale games and the broader gaming industry. In this episode, we would be diving into the origins and history of PUBG, from its humble beginnings to its rapid rise to fame, and finally, the current state of the game.
Okay, but before moving on to the actual history of PUBG, it is important for you to know what the game is actually about. So here is a little introduction. Just like in any other battle games, players parachute from a plane onto a map. They then search for weapons, armors, and other gear scattered across the terrains and buildings. Hot dropping into high traffic areas at the start of the game add excitement. Combat arises as players fight for loot. While this is happening, the playable zone starts to close in to a point on the map until one team is left. Any players caught outside the zone take gradual damage, so players must decide whether to go for extended battles or to get a vehicle to rotate early to the inside of the zone. That's why the decision-making process is crucial and requires players to adapt to different circumstances for survival. The goal of the players is of course to be the last team standing, so players will face great challenges before they can pull off a dub. The combat of PUBG follows the same formula as most other FPS games, but with different types of attachment that spawn on the ground to help you, such as sights that allow you to zoom in or suppressors that makes your gun quieter. Your essential goal in combat is to put your crosshair on the enemy and pull your trigger while controlling the recoil of your gun before the enemy do it to you. Very simple. But like any other good FPS games, it has unique and advanced mechanics such as grenade cooking, counter strafing, or crouch canceling. Overall, the gameplay of PUBG is realistic. It also provides different gameplay options. If you want to play it fast, then you can be the lone man surviving in a hot zone. Or, if you want to play it safe, you can camp your way to the final circle.
Thank you, Sheep. Now on to a little bit of background info on not just PUBG, but its creators, the people and the things that inspired it. It all started with a vision. Brendan Green, also known as Player Unknown, embarked on his game development journey fueled by inspiration from films like Battle Royale and The Hunger Games. Even an online gaming event hosted on Arma 2 called The Survivor Games. This has all pushed Green to craft his own mod. He wasn't content with the rinse and repeat gameplay popularized by games like Call of Duty. No, Green wanted a challenge. His work wasn't just a hobby. It was a mission to create something that wasn't just a game, but an experience. Green's Arma 2 mod gained traction, and soon he found himself at a crossroads. From paying to keep his own mod alive, to then becoming a DayZ consultant for his Battle Royale game mode, Green wanted more control, more freedom, and a canvas to paint his grand vision for a game that could be played over many, many years. This desire led him back to Arma mods, now on Arma 3, refining his concept, honing in on what made the core gameplay from the original Arma 2 mod so captivating. He didn't want a high win rate game, he wanted a fair game, a story in every fight. Being a game developer is a journey riddled with challenge, but then, a twist of fate, an email from Chang Han Kim, a developer from an MMO studio called Jinno Games. They saw potential in Green's vision, and they offered him a team and resources for a chance to recreate his Arma mod into a standalone game. Before Jinno Games was working with Brendan Green, they were dealing with many years of financial struggles, having not made a successful game since 2014. Chang Han Kim was forced to sell his company to Bluehole, later having his company name changed to Bluehole Jinno Games. And with the success of PUBG in 2017, they changed the name again to PUBG Studios. And there it was, the birth of PUBG. Green and his team set out to create a game that exceeded the expectations set by its mods. A game that you want to play not just once, but many times, over and over. PUBG wasn't just designed as a shooter, it was a horror game. A roller coaster of emotion where every decision, every moment could mean the difference between victory and defeat. Over the years, Brendan and his team have grown. not just in number, but in knowledge and skill. But in early 2019, Brendan left the main branch of PUBG to work on a new game titled Prologue. Not much is known about the game, but we're being told it will use the newest technology available to give the player a unique and memorable experience.
Now we bring you an exclusive interview with Sneak Attack, a professional PUBG player. And in this interview, he answers some of our questions on his opinions about general player experiences, core gameplay, the competitive scene, and the rise and falls of PUBG over the history of this game.
Hello, Sneak Attack. Welcome to the Ready Player Rewind podcast, and thanks for being here today to talk about PUBG. If you don't mind, can you start with a brief introduction about yourself and how you got into PUBG and FPS in general?
Sure, yeah. So I appreciate y'all having me and thanks for reaching out. A brief history of my competitive experience. I'd say I first started obviously with Minecraft and playing factions, hardcore factions, soup and pop PvP, and obviously the more competitive side of Minecraft with like hardcore factions, HTF. So that's where I kind of started with computer games. I was a big console gamer growing up, and I played a lot of sports games. I wasn't too invested in the Call of Duty or Battlefield or any of those games, but I definitely was a sports game enjoyer on console. And like I said, yeah, I pretty much played Minecraft as like my first PC game. And shortly after that, I got into Counter Strike Global Offensive or CS:GO, and I competed in that. And I got into all of the other battle royales, Fortnite, Apex, H1Z1, and I dabbled around in scrims and competed here and there in some of those titles. But I definitely had the most experience in Counter Strike with competing and attending a couple LAN events for CS on a smaller scale. And then I got into PUBG, and I played in the DreamHack Invitational in 2018 against Shroud and Doc, and that kind of was was the initial fuel to the fire for me with PUBG. Obviously, I wanted to compete at that time, but I was unable to, given that I was 17 and the age gate for PUBG is 18 for competing. So I was really motivated at the time, but I continued to play other games and other titles because I wasn't able to like fully commit to competing or playing in PUBG or even attempting to play in qualifiers for official tournaments. But yeah, that's kind of the little TLDR with my history of games. And then it wasn't until late 2019, early 2020, where I pretty much like fully committed to playing PUBG.
Okay, let's move on to the core gameplay. And what are your some like favorite aspect of PUBG?
My favorite aspects of core gameplay. The mechanics. There's really nothing like it. It's very realistic. I mean, the movement, the gunplay, everything. You can't find it in any other game. If you look at some of the other battle royales, they're more cartoonish. Obviously, you have Fortnite. You look at the items, you look at some of the abilities in other games. I mean, even with super people that I dabbled in a little bit when they had the open beta and competed in some of those tournaments. There's the ability aspect, and there's really nothing like PUBG in terms of just the raw mechanics and gunplay and movement and everything. Like I said,
So how do you compare the difficulty to like other VR games like Fortnite or Apex?
I think it's way more difficult, just because of like the raw aspect of it. In Apex, you have abilities where you can counter things or take out an enemy with a certain ability, and you have different like champions and characters that you can play that have different like core gameplay aspects, and obviously the abilities vary. In Fortnite, the TTK, that's also a big thing. I think the time to kill in PUBG is unlike any other game. In Apex, you have like plates and whatnot, and Even in COD, you have plates, I guess, armor plates. Um, not cartoonish and just very raw.
Do you personally think that there's a lot of cheaters that in PUBG?
Yes. I think there are obviously. I think that again, I'll compare it to other games. There's a lot of cheaters in like Call of Duty and Valorant and CS:GO and all the other titles, Apex. I mean, if you look at any game, I think with PUBG, they have recently gone about implementing new measures to prevent cheaters from being able to come back. And I know most recently they went public with their plans to add an additional step for SMS verification with ranked. If a player is like flagged as being suspicious, they'll do an additional SMS verification where I think they'll call or text the number linked to that account, and then you'll have a period of time to reply with the code that it gives you, whether it's through SMS or over the phone. Um, because right now there's a lot of accounts that just use like random phone numbers that are not actually their own for alt accounts or whatnot. So I think they're definitely taking and implementing additional steps to prevent cheaters from just hopping on alt accounts that are not actually their numbers. So we'll see how that changes things.
So PUBG is often called a dead game. What do you think the main cause of people calling it a dead game is?
I think if you look at like the player count, that obviously is like a big factor. Um, I think that you've had many like several games come out since then, like Valorant, and updates with like Apex Legends and whatnot. So, I think now there's that want for the use of abilities from a lot of players, right? They want to have, a character that has these abilities that, can counter or, impact their opponent. Specifically with like Valorant, obviously you have different agents where they all have unique abilities and they obviously impact the game in different ways and you have different roles and some are it's similar with Apex Legends, right? Um, but with PUBG, it's very raw. So you need to really kind of dial in your raw mechanics, and you can't rely on these abilities to open things up for you or secure a win or a kill or whatnot, right? So it's pretty much all on you and your gun skill and your decision making and kind of game sense. Whereas in other games like Apex Legends and Valorant, for example, I feel like players rely a lot on their abilities and the abilities that come with the agents and champions that they play, and they use those abilities to kind of bail them out of situations and fights. And you don't have that with PUBG, right? So it's just different.
Yeah, so let's shift our focus to the more competitive side of things. And one of the biggest stories in competitive would be, as you have mentioned, the new additions in the past year.
Mhm.
And one of them would be the two new maps being Vikendi and Tego. So what was your experience to it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with them adding Vikendi and Tego. I think it's obviously changed a lot. I think the implementation of other items into the game, such as the emergency pickup, um, and the blue zone grenades and the mortar and the panzer and the jammer packs and all of that stuff has obviously had a more significant impact. I think that the addition of these maps with the emergency pickups and everything has definitely changed a lot. Not just on these two maps specifically, but overall. I think what was once known as unplayable terrain with the rocks on Miramar are now considered playable, given that teams and players can get up onto the top of these rocks with the use of the emergency pickup. So there's a lot of compounds even or shanties or bowls and ridges that were once obviously really good spots and positions and they were quite playable, but now they are definitely less playable, and I'd consider some spots to be unplayable if there are teams that are on top of these mountains or rock, right? So it's definitely shaking things up. I think teams are still adapting to the changes with the meta item wise as well as map wise. I think Vikendi and Tego, even at this point, there's still spots and zones that have been like unexplored in terms of competitive play. And I think it'll continue to take time for teams to adapt. I think there's a difference in regions. I think Asia is definitely more advanced with their developments with the new meta, with the items as well as the maps, and I think they obviously have like a totally different approach to the game compared to like the West, right? Um, but yeah, I think it'll take some time, and the maps are still um, you know being digested, and you know it's Dago and Vikendi are pretty hectic, especially with all the new items, right? So yeah.
Yeah, so another addition recently would be the new weapons such as the mortar, smoke launcher, and blue zone grenades and panzer.
Yeah.
And as you have mentioned, you're not really fans of them being in comp, and would you say your experience with them was like generally negative?
I'd say with the Panzer for sure. I think it's pretty skillless. Um, there's no reload on it. It's not in a crate. I think some of these changes with, them adding it to a crate and adding a reload on, would be more appealing to me. And I think even just like the general public, um, I think that they need to go. They either need to go or they need to be put in a crate, and they need to have a reload on them. I have been on the receiving end of Panzers before in hot drops, um, and I have also used them against people. Um, and I don't know. I'm not a fan of them. I think the smoke launcher is fine. I think the mortars are fine. Obviously, you have to kind of calculate things with the mortar, especially if there's a difference in the height, right? So kind of have to calculate and go Einstein mode with the mortars. So I think that's obviously takes some more skill and some more brain power, but I think that they need to get rid of the Panzer. I think that they need to make adjustments to the Storms and or completely get rid of them. I think there's inconsistencies with visibility, which obviously is RNG because there's been times where my teammates and I get beamed through the snowstorm when it's completely like just like a blizzard, and you can't see 5 meters in front of you, and you're getting shot 100 meters out in the storm. Um, and then you talk with the player that ended up killing you, and they're like, "No, I just saw you completely fine." And it's like, what, like how, So there's inconsistencies. I mean, um, you could have a teammate next to you be on the same monitor settings, same NVIDIA color settings, same in-game settings, same brightness, same everything. You could be side by side, and everything can be the same setting wise, and one of you may see, you know, more clear and have a better picture in terms of visibility in the storm compared to the other. So I think there's a big question there with the client side aspect and the consistency with the storms. I think those can go. I think there needs to be adjustments made with the blue zone grenades. And yeah, I think those are some of the changes that I'd make.
And you've mentioned that the emergency parachute changed how players play the map by quite a lot. So how would you describe the change in your your gameplay and your team's gameplay due to the addition of emergency parachute in competitive?
Um, it's definitely like chaos. You can have a team be on an emergency pickup, and you're in a fight in a compound, and they're looking down, and they see a bunch of util being used, and smokes out, and they're seeing some knocks in the feed, and then they want to capitalize on that and take advantage, and they'll just parachute down and fly in and maybe land on top of the building and either clean up the fight or just kind of disrupt and make the fight even more chaotic. We've obviously had games where we have won from using the emergency pickup and the rotations that we have, chosen to make from it and with it. We have also lost games from using it and have died out of the air. So it's kind of just a toss up. It has definitely changed the game. It's made it more chaotic on all maps, and yeah, it's definitely a lot more hectic with having them in esports. To pubs and public games is completely fine, and catering those changes towards new players. But I think that there needs to be a divide between the implementations that they make for new players and then not letting those things cross that barrier and impact or affect the competitive side of the game with ranked, obviously, or even esports, right? One of the biggest changes recently to esports is, they added panzers and mortars and blue zone grenades, and they have, the Kendi in now, and there's bears on that. They have the snowstorm, they have the sandstorm, they have, Tago, emergency pickups. There's a lot of things that have been added to the competitive side that I don't necessarily agree with, and I don't think a lot of professional players agree with, obviously. But some of those changes are more for the public side of things, at least the way that I see it, right? Especially with like the Panzerfaust and items like that. Those are more for the casual side, but they have crossed that barrier, unfortunately, and that border, and they have obviously impacted the competitive side. I mean, most recently in the World Championship, which is in Bangkok, Thailand right now, Purple Mood Gaming was one up on Vikendi on on the first day of the losers bracket. And with the losers bracket, obviously at PGC right now, there's 32 teams, and they had two groups of 16. They had Group A and B, and then top eight for each of those groups went to the winners bracket, and the bottom eight went to the losers bracket. And the losers bracket was a 2-day best of 12, six on one day, 6 on day 1, and 6 on day 2. And the bottom eight out of that 16 from the losers bracket were sent home already, right? So then they went down from 32 teams to 24 after the losers bracket. And Purple Mood Gaming was one up on Vikendi on day 1, and their final player was in the blue healing and trying to wrap around, and he died to a bear.
Mechanical skill is not as high in Japan as it is in most other regions, but they play a very smart defensive play. Like, run back to your cave. That man came out of nowhere, and there's nothing you can do to prepare for it either.
No. And they ended up not qualifying to the last chance qualifier, which was the top 8 from them. They ended up taking 9th by 1 point. And who knows what would have happened if he was able to survive and continue to wrap around in the blue zone, right? I mean, obviously he was taking damage, but he really had no counter to that bear. And that's one of the things where it's like a head scratcher. They add this new thing with having a bear that can do lethal damage to players, and you have to use a lot of ammunition just to take the thing down, right? And there's several of them in the different caves spread across the map. So I don't know. I think for role players and public players, having the bears in the game makes it more immersive, especially on Vikendi with the snow and everything. But in terms of competitive play, I don't think anybody's looking for role play or immersion. So yeah.
Yeah, you just want the least amount of randomness possible in these esports settings, right?
Of course, yeah. I think limiting RNG, and that's the name of the game, right? I think there's RNG in every game, but obviously teams and players will always do their best to limit RNG and mitigate that RNG from affecting their game. But with the changes that PUBG has made recently and the additions that they've made to the competitive esports side of things, I think there's even more RNG, right? So it's a little bit more difficult to limit it, but it is still possible.
Another thing people call a bad thing about PUBG is the slow-paced nature of it. Do you Do you think that's putting people away from the game? Do you think they should change that slow-paced gameplay?
Um, it's very unique, obviously. Like I said, there's no game like it. Um, and the games do take, like 30 minutes, or more than 30 minutes, depending on if it's like a game that goes down to the phase 9 dot. And there's several players or teams still left alive. On the esports side of things, obviously, you can have games in ranked and just regular pub games, public matches end really quick. It just depends on like, how everything plays out. But you look at a game like CS:GO, which was the MR15, right? Or whatnot. And now, you have MR12 with CS2. And, you know, it's different. They're trying to shorten the game and they kind of copied Valorant in that aspect, right? And I think there's definitely something to look at with like the attention span of gamers today, and kind of maximizing playtime or games, right? And if you look at it, like CS2 has moved to that MR12 system even competitively, right? Not just like with the competitive side in the game, with comp matches in public or whatnot. I mean, the whole game, the esports side of it as well, has moved from that MR15. So the matches take less time. And if you think about it, players are able to probably play more games, throughout the day with the MR12 and having the matches be shorter. Um, I think that PUBG is fine where it's at right now, just because of how unique of a game it is and how the system works. It's not, a traditional like tac shooter or FPS game where it's 5v5. It's similar to Apex and Fortnite where you have teams of four. Well, I mean, obviously not in Apex and Fortnite, but similar in terms of having more than just two teams competing, right? Like in PUBG, traditionally you'll have 16 teams in a lobby, making 64 players because it's teams of four in PUBG, right? So you have 16 teams of four, equating to 64 players in one game, duking it out. And then the last team or player standing is, victorious, comes out on top and, get the chicken dinner, right? So I think this pace of the game is fine. I wouldn't be opposed to seeing a change and making it more faster pace in the near future. At least maybe starting with like public games. But I think it's just so unique, and it's worked for now. But obviously, if they were to make a change, I wouldn't be opposed to it, and it would obviously make the matches a little bit more hectic, which I think in turn would be potentially a more pleasurable viewing experience. But we'll see. I think it's okay where it's at.
That wraps up our journey through the history of PUBG. Red and Green went from modder to creator, from dreamer to visionary. PUBG is a testament to where ambition can take you, and it's just one story in the vast world of gaming history. Thanks for tuning into Ready Player Rewind. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a like and comment. Catch us in the next episode as we uncover the history of Counter-Strike. Until next time.